Hello, everyone. It's time to go around the Big Ten. I'm Marc Givler. Got Chip Minnich with me here as always. Interesting weekend, championship weekend, final playoff rankings reveal. 4 Big Ten teams in the playoff. I believe there was a podcast about a month ago that said this was a lock that the Big Ten would get 4 teams in the playoff. That's what happened. Look how smart we are, Chip. So it's happened. The rankings are out. We're going to get to that in a minute. I want to quickly recap the Big Ten championship game, Oregon over Penn State. I was probably a little bit higher scoring than I thought it would be. I had like 31-24.
Right.
But that was very much kind of what I expected. I expected about a touchdown game. I expected Penn State to hang, and I expected Oregon's playmakers to kind of be the difference. You kind of were in the same boat. I think you had Oregon like 31-21 or so. So
yeah,
a little more offense, especially that first half was a little nutty. But like, I think that generally played out the way we thought it would.
It did. And congratulations to Oregon. I mean, got to give credit where credit is due. First year in the Big Ten, winning the Big Ten championship. And also I thought Penn State played better down the stretch. For a while, I thought maybe Oregon, the possibility of them running away with it was there, but Penn State did, like you said, like they played competitively, and it was an entertaining game to watch for the most part.
Yeah. And so, Oregon does what they need to do, and then the rankings come out. And, oh boy, should Oregon have thrown that game on Saturday night at the end? Like, should they have let Penn State come back? Because the prize for the number 1 overall seed and being the only undefeated team in the field was really the toughest path of all the byes to the championship. You're going to get Ohio State or Tennessee in the first game you play. You might get Texas after that, and then obviously if the chalk holds up, you would get Georgia. But that didn't seem to be very rewarding for Oregon.
No, I would completely agree with you. I think if anything, Oregon, what did they do to deserve this? Considering the fact that they were undefeated, I'm not saying that they should just get an automatic clear berth to the national championship game, but I agree with you. I think that however this was designed, Oregon, like as you said, they may have been better off losing that game to Penn State than winning it.
Yeah, I couldn't really believe that when I looked at it, and it just felt like they top-loaded everything with all the best teams.
Yes.
And then conversely, Penn State, what a gift.
Oh, yes.
What a gift. And look, this is not anti-Penn State. I've been a proponent of Penn State's on the show. I've talked about, I think the national audience has overlooked them. I think people act like they would, I was laughing at people who said they would get blown out at home, by like an Ole Miss or something in the first round of the playoffs. I'm like, no, not a chance. Like, I think Penn State's a pretty good team, but they lost at home to the best team on the regular season schedule in Ohio State. And then they lose a neutral site game to the best team on their schedule that faced all year in Oregon, and competitive in both games, but losses and games where they clearly were not better than their opponent. And you reward them. They don't drop behind Ohio State, which makes me wonder why the game in Happy Valley was even played, since they both have 2 losses and Ohio State beat them in Happy Valley. And then they lose the Big Ten championship game. And they are basically like, if James Franklin doesn't win 2 games in this postseason, there's no defending him anymore.
Yeah, that was the one thing, besides the fact that ESPN made the announcement far more dramatic than necessary. I mean, come on, you knew full well that people wanted to see how this was going to be seeded. But to your point, you need to build in something into the system where you are going to reward, because that was kind of like the theme of the anti-college football playoff expansion is, okay, you're devaluing the regular season. Well, you just did by the way that you seeded this. So I think that needs to be kind of a, hey, you need to make modifications to this. The fact that Ohio State, yeah, they weren't in the conference championship game, but they did beat Penn State at Penn State, so they should be rewarded for that. So Ohio State should have been seeded, in my estimation, ahead of Penn State.
Yeah, and look, I get the line of thinking with Ohio State of like, well, don't lay an egg against Michigan at home, and you want to, and 1,000%, like 1,000%,
right?
You have to win your games on your schedule, but I don't see how you look at like a blind resume of Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Texas, and come to the conclusion that Ohio State's the fourth best team of those four.
Oh, without, yeah.
They have a better resume than all of them, really. I mean, they beat Penn State. Texas's resume is actually pretty weak. I thought Texas was overranked. You know, if Texas wanted to be ranked higher, you know, maybe they should have not lost to Georgia's backup quarterback. You know, they lost to Georgia on neutral site to the backup quarterback. They lost to Georgia at home. Like, their wins aren't particularly impressive. I think ultimately the Michigan result was the difference with Texas and Ohio State, which I get to an extent. I think the rest of Ohio State's resume and the rest of Texas's resume aren't even remotely close or similar, but I get that. They did have a common opponent, and it was eye-opening. And then I've said this for a couple of weeks. If you took the branding off of Indiana and Notre Dame's resumes, they're like identical. Except Indiana's got a better loss. Notre Dame's best win is slightly better, and Notre Dame's loss is much, much worse. And they've had Indiana like way back in the rankings and Notre Dame way up. So like, I don't know how, like my thing was, I don't know how you can have Ohio State ahead of Indiana, but not ahead of Notre Dame.
Kind of a crazy thought is that Notre Dame's best win was Army. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm against Army having a good year. But if you had said to me back in August that Notre Dame is going to be a playoff team and their best win is going to come against Army, and that's on a schedule that included a home trip, a road trip to Texas A&M, a road trip to USC, a home game versus Florida State, and your best win of the season is against Army.
And by the way, you're going to lose at home to a MAC school.
That's right. That's correct.
To an okay MAC, like not even like a great MAC school, like a
correct
run-of-the-mill MAC school.
Right. They qualified for a bowl, so that's a plus in Notre Dame's favor. But you're right. I think Notre Dame, again, I think for Curt Cignetti, I know that he is attracting more and more. I don't want to call them enemies, but people that are kind of wanting to get some shots in on him. But I think he's onto something when he says, about the fact that, that it's Indiana and that there's a brand bias against Indiana. Like if it was, like you said, like Notre Dame and Indiana, if you didn't know who was who, the fact that they are identical. I agree with Cignetti when he says, like, if we were Michigan, that they would be ranked higher. I think all these things are true. So now it's going to be interesting to see when the playoff game is held in South Bend, how Indiana responds, because the national stage is theirs.
That to me is one of, if not the most interesting first round games. I'm fascinated to see how Indiana does in that game. I think the line opened up at 8 or 8.5. I think I've seen it trickling down to like 7.5. So I don't, what that means right now. I don't know. I guess we'll find out as the line moves throughout the next week. But I'm fascinated for that game. But yeah, I think Oregon got totally hosed when they were the clear number. Like this wasn't a controversial like number one seeding. Like everyone knew, or Oregon was clearly the number one seed. And so I thought they got hosed, and in the process, Ohio State caught some strays in that process and got screwed a little bit as well. But we'll see. I mean, ultimately, like win the games, like win the games on your schedule. And who knows, maybe if you're looking at this from the perspective of like Ohio State or Oregon, especially Ohio State, because they got to play a first round game. Like if you're Ohio State and you do beat Tennessee and then Oregon, aren't you feeling like $1 million heading into the semi? Like you got to feel invincible at that point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and like it does open up at that point because Texas is okay, but like they're vulnerable. There's no guarantee Texas is going to get through the semis. Like you could totally get some random team in the semis.
Right.
And then Georgia, who may or may not even have Carson Beck, who's looked vulnerable all year. Like it feels like the winner of that Ohio State Oregon game, if it's in fact, or the winner of that Oregon Rose Bowl game, whether it's Ohio State or Tennessee, the winner of that game is going to be feeling awfully good about themselves and their chances of winning the whole thing at that point, because I think it's going to open up at that point. But to get to the semis is going to be a bear of a task for like Ohio State or Tennessee. And I didn't find that particularly fair given really the underwhelming resume of Texas, given the underwhelming resume of Notre Dame, and given that Penn State had their chances to beat both Ohio State and Oregon in one at home, one on a neutral field, and wasn't able to do that and seemingly got rewarded for it. But I guess they were consistent across the board. They didn't want conference championship game appearances and losses to dramatically impact a school's standing in the rankings. And so I guess they were consistent with that across the board with what they did with SMU, keeping them in, what they did with Penn State and Texas, not dropping them too far, et cetera. So we will see. But again, I think and Ward Manuel made a point. He's not wrong in this, but he basically was like, our goal, our mandate is to rank the teams like 1 to 25. And then the process, the agreed upon process, decides the matchups. Like we don't actually create the matchups. We just rank the teams 1 through 25. And then the agreed upon set of rules is what determines what the matchups are. It was kind of a cop-out, but I also it was a factual statement, but it was also like a little bit of a cop-out. But I do understand where he's coming from. But if your system is such that you're rewarding or that you're not rewarding the top seed, we got to have a new conversation about things. I personally think a good change would be to allow the top 5 conference champions to have their auto bids, but have nothing guaranteed to them in terms of a bye or terms of like you're in the dance, you're in the top 12 somewhere, but you may be, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You don't necessarily have to be top, the top 4 conference champions don't automatically get buys. Like I think that would have alleviated some of this, and probably all of it. I think if just that was in play, of where like Arizona State or whatever, Boise, like you're in, but like you're not guaranteed anything as far as like where you're going to slot in the ranking. And I think that would have probably avoided the situations we don't like about the rankings.
I mean, tweaks to the system are going to happen. I mean, I'm just thinking, and I realize it's a scary thought to contemplate, the fact that, we're getting closer and closer to, like 30 years of, ago, with the BCS. And the only reason I'm bringing that up in conversation is that when the BCS first came out, people were so excited because, okay, like you're getting the top 2, and then the flaws in the system became evident and tweaks were made. And so my larger point being is that I think there are definitely areas for improvement. I think, for all of the whining, and that's not what I'm going to refer to it, whining by Alabama fans about, strength of schedule. Hey, I mean, it's completely laughable that they were complaining about strength of schedule when the reality is they lost conference games, which is why I applaud the committee for putting SMU in over Alabama, which would have been easy. I am sure if the game had finished with Clemson routing SMU, that Alabama would be in. That being the case, SMU did everything within their power to make it a game. Very entertaining game Saturday night. So again, my anticipation is maybe not dramatic changes, but I'm sure some tweaks, some modifications this offseason to try to address the critics, because they're out there. They're always going to be out there. There's for all the people that, like a 12-team playoff, they're already clamoring for more. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction this goes.
Yeah, I don't want any more than 12. My sweet spot was always 8, but it's 12, so we're going to live with that. But yeah, I think there's going to be some tweaks. As I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this, and they pointed out, like, look, when these rules were put in place, when this 12-teamer was decided, and the buys and like the criteria were all decided, the conferences looked completely different.
That's right.
Pac-12 was still a thing. Like, the Big 12 had Oklahoma and Texas. Like, there was also, like, the ACC wasn't whatever the ACC is now. It's like a country, nationwide, just mismatch of outcasts and everything else. But so there's really no reason to think they won't maybe revisit some of these things in terms of, again, I don't think the top 4 conference champions need to be guaranteed a bye. I think it's fair enough to let them in the tournament.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get any situations where you get a 9-3 conference champion, and now they could get a bye over like an 11-1 runner-up or a 12-1 runner-up even. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see if they do anything with that. But at the end of the day, like, I'm just excited for the games.
Yeah.
Sit here and complain about, this team should have got a better seeding, or this team got a tough path, or probably unfair. But at the end of the day, I'm fascinated for these games. We're going to dive into this, throughout. We've got several more episodes coming until the first. We got 3 more episodes after this one coming before the first playoff games kick off. So we'll take deeper dives into the matchups and things like that moving forward. But tonight we just really wanted to kind of talk about the rankings and kind of, our reaction to them, and certain, who's got the easiest paths, who's got the more difficult paths. And then we also want to talk about the bowl games a little bit, because there are bowl games still, despite all of the hysteria around the playoffs. Bowl games are still a thing, and there are several Big Ten teams in the bowl games. I'm bringing up the schedule now. One of the more interesting ones, I think, is that Illinois-South Carolina game. And we'll see, like, there's going to be opt-outs. There's going to be transfer portal. Like, hopefully the rosters aren't, like, completely decimated. But that Citrus Bowl, South Carolina, Illinois, to me is one of the best bowl game matchups.
I agree. I agree.
Two teams to finish hot, like 9-3 apiece, and in the 2 best leagues. That could be fun.
Yeah, we talked previously about, Illinois kind of, say what you will about Indiana, and again, they deserve all of the praise and acclaim that they've had, because nobody anticipated a season like this. But I've been very much in the camp of, okay, Illinois is up there as well, like worthy of a lot of praise and adulation, because Bielema, he takes a lot of shots, some of it fair, some of it, probably, kind of just, fans just enjoying taking shots at him. But he did a really good job with that Illinois team. And to your point about opt-outs and the transfer portal, and, we'll see what kind of a team Illinois puts on the field against South Carolina. And I know South Carolina, they're kind of still nursing some hurt feelings about being completely, out of the college football playoff, but this is where you have to kind of regroup. And I do believe that, like you said, this is one of the more fascinating bowl games outside of the college football playoff.
And with getting 4, one impact I'm seeing, so you get 4, the Big Ten gets 4 teams into the college football playoff. Well, that makes your bowl matchups a lot tougher. A lot of fighting above your weight class going on in some of these matchups, where you're getting like a fringe just outside the playoff mix team from the SEC against a Big Ten team that's 8th or 9th or something, which gets me to my other really interesting bowl game, which is we're getting an Alabama-Michigan rematch. And boy, is that going to look a lot different than it looked a year ago. My initial instinct is buckle up, Michigan. But, I mean, the last time we saw them, they were making Ohio State look like crap. So maybe something has clicked there. But that's the ReliaQuest Bowl on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve day, 12 o'clock noon on New Year's Eve. That's going to be fun, I think. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be competitive. We'll see. Who's going to play? Is Jalen Milroe going to play? Is that, or any, how many? We've already seen a couple of Alabama guys hit the portal. We've already seen a couple of Michigan guys hit the portal. Who's going to be playing? Of course, that's why we'll do our deeper dives later into these when it gets really close to the games and we actually know who might be playing. But this is just kind of our initial reactions to these. But that to me is a very interesting matchup.
It is because, I was just mentioning how South Carolina nursing a lot of hurt feelings. I mean, Alabama's first and foremost in that line. I mean, they really thought they were getting in the college football playoff. And I understand, kind of from their mindset about the whole strength of schedule thing. But I am not backing down from the mindset that, all right, Alabama played a weak non-conference schedule. So for Greg Byrne, who's our athletic director, to make these public statements about how Alabama needs to weaken their non-conference schedule, for Alabama to be complaining about being excluded when the reality is it was because Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and on the road to Oklahoma, both of them, I'm just going to say, very mediocre teams. That is a major reason why Alabama is not in the college football playoff. I realize that they're extremely talented. We've been talking about the idea of opt-outs and transfers and all of that. So it's going to be interesting, like you said, as it gets closer and closer to, getting an idea as to what kind of a team Alabama is going to be fielding. They certainly should be the favorite based on the talent that they have at their disposal in comparison to Michigan. But as you said, and I agree, what Michigan did in their last game certainly is something that Alabama will need to kind of take into account, that they can't go into this game too cocky and too confident that they'll be able to handle the Wolverines with no problem.
Yeah, so that game kicks off after the second round of the playoff game. So we're
right.
It feels like the next 3 weeks, almost an eternity, is going to take place in the next 3 weeks, given all the portal stuff and everything else going on in college football the next few weeks. So we'll do a deeper dive into that when we know who's playing. But again, I kind of mentioned teams from the Big Ten are going to have to punch above their weight class a little bit here. Here's another example of that. Rutgers draws Kansas State in the Rate Bowl on Thursday, December 26th, day after Christmas, 5:30 p.m. on ESPN. Boy, again, all things equal on portal entries and things like that, that's a tough draw, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. And again, I haven't seen anything yet, but we keep talking about opt-outs, and I'm not that I'm hoping that this happens, but what if Kyle Monangai opts out? I mean, that you're talking about a significant, aspect of the Rutgers offense. And that's not to say that Rutgers is a one-man show, because Rutgers, they were able to win. There were times when Monangai wasn't able to go this season and Rutgers was able to win. But like you said, punching above their weight class, I think, Kansas State probably is the deserved favorite. So as it gets closer and closer, I think what kind of a team that Rutgers has, I think, credit to Greg Schiano, because I have no doubt in my mind that he is going to capitalize on this extra practice time. That's the thing that I think that the average fan probably just kind of either looks beyond. They look at it like, oh, okay, like a bowl trip and the players don't want to go. The coaches, yeah, the coaches are excited about the bowl game, but the coaches are more excited about the developmental time, the practice time with the players that are going to be participating, the players that probably were redshirted this year, that they're going to possibly get potentially an opportunity to play in a bowl game. The coaches, this is why they really enjoy the whole bowl preparation, because it gives them a glimpse into next year's team.
Yeah, these games are big for programs like Rutgers to get those extra bowl practices. And yeah, I agree with you. I think the availability of Kyle Monangai, whether he's available or not, will determine how competitive Rutgers can be in that game. So we'll see how that plays out here the next couple of weeks. Again, punching above weight class. USC draws Texas A&M in the Las Vegas Bowl. That's going to be a 10:30 kick on ESPN on Friday, December 27th. That one's interesting. A&M, they've got guys portaling. Shamar Stewart's already
NFL draft.
So the assumption would be he's probably not going to play. He's a guy who may have a first-round grade. USC, maybe not in as bad of a spot as far as draft guys who may want to sit out. But how will the portal look for them? There's already kind of rumors floating around some of their guys, but I don't think anything official yet. This would be a good way to end the season, though, for Lincoln Riley, who I think is really going to be in the spotlight next year. But this can kind of maybe give some people some nice warm fuzzies going into the offseason if they can pull that one off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's face it. You always want to end the season on a winning note. When it comes to USC, their first season in the Big Ten was so far from anything that anyone associated with USC ever anticipated. I mean, they truly thought that they would have a much better season. And I'm not meaning to, take shots at this bowl game, but I mean, this is a far cry from what anyone associated with the USC program signed up for. I'm sure, when it comes to the boosters, especially that are involved in paying Lincoln Riley's hefty salary, I mean, this is not kind of what they wanted either. So this, I keep going back to it, but the idea of this should hopefully be a springboard to a better 2025. But yeah, this is going to be kind of a first glimpse at what kind of a team USC could be fielding in 2025. And, again, if USC doesn't necessarily play well, we're just throwing another log onto the fire that is warming up considerably under Lincoln Riley's seat.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. Here's one that I think this one looks fair on paper. This one looks like a balanced matchup on paper, and that's Boston College, Nebraska in the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium. That'll be at noon on ABC on Saturday, December 28th. This feels like if you're one of those people who's into conference pride, I'm not, but I get it. The SEC's super annoying, super obnoxious with it, so it kind of, I think, has pushed more Big Ten fans into being more into the Big Ten national picture and everything else, just because of how obnoxious SEC fans are about it. So I think this is one of your hope you're kind of banking on, right? Like Nebraska, now they're going to the Northeast, but Boston College lost their quarterback. Lots going on there. Two coaches trying to kind of build a foundation there for their programs. That rule is second year. Bill O'Brien, year one. That looks like a winnable matchup.
It does. And the reason I'm smiling about it is, let's face it, when it comes to a bowl game in New York City, the day after, a few days after Christmas, okay, the weather, I'm not saying that it will be, but potentially colder. Traditionally, when I've watched this game or turned it on, some of the lasting memories and images that I have in my mind are of from the University of Miami players that have been there. It didn't matter when they were playing Wisconsin or Rutgers; they were all shivering and not wanting to be there. And the play on the field demonstrated that. When it comes to Nebraska, as well as Boston College, both coaches are pretty much, I would say that not that they would be averse to going somewhere warm, but I think that they're kind of, their mindset is, hey, we'll play anywhere, anytime. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to is this game. I'm not saying that it's going to be the best bowl game, but let's face it, kind of a lower tier bowl game. Two programs, like you said, two coaches that are trying to build their programs into bigger and better things. I think this is a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon watching Nebraska and Boston College and see how this one turns out.
Yeah, I think there's games we can look at, how motivated is Alabama going to be? like there's games we can look at like that. This is a game where I think, regardless, it may not be a pretty game. I'm not saying it's going to be a pretty game, but both of these programs, I think, want to be there and want to end their season on a high note with a win. I think this will be a game where both teams are really bought into it versus, like, again, we can look at some of these other games like, well, what's Miami's incentive? What's Alabama? I can see that in some other situations. This one doesn't feel like that at all. Another really good one, I probably should have pointed this out, the other two that I liked, but I think Iowa, Missouri is an interesting one. And they're celebrating my 40th birthday on Monday, December 30th at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN. I've not yet heard how they're going to be celebrating my birthday on the broadcast yet, but I'll let you know. Missouri kind of disappointing this year. I think people expected them to really be in the playoff mix this year, coming off the way they finished last year. Didn't happen. But Iowa was a little disappointing this year. I thought they had enough back. They got rid of Brian Ferentz in terms of play. No more Brian Ferentz calling plays. They lose that early game to Iowa State on like the 80-yard field goal at the buzzer, and just weren't able to really put it together consistently throughout the season. Had some really good moments, had some really bad moments. So this one's interesting to me. I think it'll be a physical game. Big Ten SEC, of course. So we'll get that out of the way, and that'll be a talking point, I'm sure. But again, can Iowa can run the ball, but can Iowa match up with, and we'll get into more of this as we see the opt-outs, because again, Mizzou might have some opt-outs here for sure.
Right.
I mean, who knows, like Caleb Johnson, is he going to play? But let's assuming today that they're going to be relatively healthy. Can Iowa play that stock? Can Iowa keep up with Missouri in terms of their athletes on the perimeter?
Very good question. I mean, I think with we'll get a better feel for how this game is going to go with the opt-outs, because you mentioned Caleb Johnson, with Iowa. Not that I anticipated him being a factor, but Cade McNamara announced his decision to go. With Luther Burden for Missouri, he declared for the NFL draft. So it's going to be. That's why I go back to it. It's like it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge of, all right, what kind of a team do we have for 2025? What kind of what suits our personnel that we have available for this game. So I think both teams, like you said, that they're different offensive styles. I mean, there's a contrast there, but I think this should be interesting just because I think they're both kind of on the same level in terms of, like you said, they both had somewhat disappointing seasons in 2024, and they're going to both be looking, all right, let's finish the year on a high note. So it's good. This is going to be an interesting game to watch, besides your birthday, of course.
Yes. No, I do think this is one of the games we've mentioned here so far that will be heavily dependent upon the portal and draft decisions and who's playing. I think this could swing wildly based on who's playing in this game and who isn't. But it will be interesting. Again, I think both these teams entered the season thinking they could be dark horse, playoff contenders, and it didn't play out that way. A lot of good Big Ten games there on New Year's Eve. We've already talked about two of them. Here's the third one. Louisville, Washington in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas, 2 p.m. CBS, New Year's Eve. This is, again, a bit of a punching above the weight class. I just don't know what to make of Washington this year. I had a tough time wrapping my brain around them at times. There were weeks they played really well. There was weeks I thought they laid eggs. I don't know what to make of this matchup.
Yeah, I would give the edge to Louisville, but when it comes to it comes down to who really wants to be there, who's excited to be there. We talk about like the opt-outs, the transfers, all those kind of things. Like, I think Washington, the fact that they made a bowl game, considering just the massive upheaval that they had from the coaching staff, as well as just the player turnover from last year, let alone joining the Big Ten. I think there should be some recognition of that okay, this was a good first year in the Big Ten, but by no means is it a kind of a season that you should kind of, rest comfortably on your laurels, so to speak. So with Washington, I think this might be an opportunity for them to finish the year and then just kind of, all right, now, Coach Fish, this is your team. I know that, the way that, technically speaking, he wasn't even probably even thinking of being the head coach of Washington, a calendar year ago, when the previous Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl was played. So I think, this is going to be a good opportunity for Washington to kind of finish up strong and just kind of position themselves for a better year in year 2 of the Big Ten.
We saved the best for last, the best bowl game for last, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Minnesota, Virginia Tech. Chip, please tell me we're going to see PJ Fleck take a Duke's Mayo bath.
We want it.
Anything better this bowl season than watching PJ Fleck's crazy ass taking a Duke's Mayo bath after a win?
You know full well that not only that he wants it, but the whole country wants that. The whole country. And I mean, I think, we talk about, the bowl games, like so much of it really depends on the teams wanting to be there. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I really think Minnesota, this is the kind of a game for all of the gimmick, the gimmickry of, okay, the fact that your coach is going to be doused in mayo. I really think that they're excited about the possibility of seeing that happen. I really do. And so I think this is going to be an interesting game to watch just because of just, PJ Fleck, has all of his detractors, but this will be something that I think the entire country is going to be anxious to see.
Should they make him row a canoe in a river of mayo?
That's a lot of mayo. That's a lot of mayo.
Well, Dukes, I know. Look, the profit margins on mayo have to be pretty good. It's not that difficult.
Okay.
Okay. I think Dukes can figure this out.
That's
like a lazy river around the field of mayo, and just have PJ Fleck like row a canoe through it. And then he's got to jump in at the end.
I was going to say, because you
got to take the bath.
He is notorious for, I mean, we're talking, like he's got nothing on like Jack Black, in School of Rock. Like when he, like in terms of like crowd surfing, like within his locker room after a big win, like diving into his, so you might be on to something there. Like if they have it where, okay, coach, you have to dive headfirst into a sea of mayo, he'd do it. I mean, I don't think he would even have to win the game, but the fact that, like I think he would just want to do that anyway. So you might be onto something.
Absolutely. So Minnesota officially America's team here for bowl season as we all wait, hoping for a PJ Fleck Duke's Mayo bath after that game. That'll do it for this episode. We will be back in a couple days. We're expecting we're going to look at the Big Ten schedule for next year. We're going to maybe talk about any news that happens in the transfer portal in the next couple days, or any opt-outs or anything like that could affect things, and some coaching movement as well. We're going to get into all that Wednesday night. So for our midweek update. So keep it here throughout the next few weeks as we talk playoffs, Big Ten past the playoff, Big Ten bowl matchups, scheduling, and transfer portal, and everything else that's going on in the world of Big Ten football. But thank you again, Chip, for joining me, and thanks everyone again for watching and listening, and we'll see you in a couple days.
Thank you.